Hi, this is Todd Olthoff, and welcome to another edition of Screencasts Online. With the update to High Sierra came updates to macOS Server as well. Now, we've covered Server extensively in the past, but that was back with the Mavericks version of Server, so we thought it was time for an update. This version of Server is different from previous ones as Apple has chosen to move 3 server components to High Sierra itself to make them available to all users. For some, those components might have been the reason they wanted to use Server in the first place, so there's no longer a need for Server as a dedicated application when running High Sierra. We will cover each of these services in detail. We will also take a look at an issue with gaining access to file shares on iOS devices due to the removal of the iOS file sharing service and webDAV sharing, which were built into previous versions of Server. To achieve this, we will set up the VPN service and use Readdle's Documents application for iOS to access those file shares both locally and remotely. So let's get started by taking a look at some of the services that were exclusive to Server that are now included in High Sierra itself.